Hey everybody, I'm Ashleigh Banfield and this is Drop Dead Serious. I wanted to talk to you about something that has been on my mind, and I'm not going to lie, I've been pretty obsessed with this case in Ohio, the 16 children. Hamden, Ohio, Vinton County. It happened on June 30th. Sheriff's deputies were executing a warrant on a house unrelated and found 16 kids crammed into a 12 by 12 room. The governor said it was pure evil, almost like feral animals, deplorable, horrendous, disgusting. One or more of the children may have died if officers had not responded to the home when they did. This is the case that has just, consumed me. A, how does it happen? But B, what do you do next? Yeah, I mean, you have 16 kids who probably know no other life other than horror, and horror is the norm. How do you save them, but at the same time tenderly care for them, but at the same time extract from them the forensic evidence you need to know? They're the witnesses. They're the backbone of the case against the people that did this to them. They're the ones who we need the most to talk. And they are the least likely to want to, sometimes. Not in the Turpin case. They wanted to talk, they wanted to escape. But in so many other cases, the dynamics are so complicated. Some of these children still love these parents that may have abused the hell out of them in all sorts of ways. But they're still their parents. And so this is why I decided to check up on someone who I know would have the answers as to what is happening, likely right this moment, with these kids in the Cider house. What is happening to them? Where are they? And how are the forensic investigators, the interviewers, going to extract the information that's needed from these kids to build a case against the adults who've been charged, their parents and their grandparents? How do you talk to them? How do you get them to talk, especially when they can't talk or won't talk or are way too terrified to talk? So Denise Rodriguez Bowman, she was that person. She responded to the Turpin case. She questioned those kids. She forensically interviewed them. She knows more about how to deal with kids like the Cider 16 than any of us. And I had an incredible opportunity to ask her every question I could in a limited amount of time that I had. But oh my God, I had so many questions for her. So just so you know her background, she was the Director of Forensic Services and Victim Advocacy with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department when they were called to the Turpin house. And that's what she jumped into. That was her role, her action. And since that time, she's left the Sheriff's Department and she's started a nonprofit called Speak Heart Alliance, where she does a lot of the same services and has, is able to offer a lot of her same expertise. I had so many questions for her in a limited amount of time, but wow, did I ever learn a lot. And you will too. Here's our conversation. Denise, thank you so much for being on Drop Dead Serious. I have so many questions. And people like you're just like child whisperers when it comes to kids who have been traumatized. I want to speak mostly about what happened in Ohio with these 16 kids, but because you've got, the Turpin case as your history, I'd love to just ask you if when you heard about Ohio and the 16 kids there, if everything from Turpin flooded back to you.
Unfortunately, it's not like that in my work. I've done 25 years of forensic interviewing in child abuse, human trafficking. When I see these really horrific and sad cases that come on in the media, it just breaks my heart. It reminds me of every kid that I've interviewed, many of them who've been tortured, sexually abused, starved. So it does take me back to that, but actually that case in particular that happened in Riverside County kind of never leaves you. It's always there. You always kind of think about like what happened to those kids or wish them well, and just all of the cases kind of run together in your mind and our mind as professionals. There are some that are really significant. Turpin was one of them, but there are many others that I've worked on that don't make the media.
I'll bet. And I think the Turpin case made the media because A, there were 13, which was just
Yes,
mind blowing. And then
right.
B, these pictures of them in the Disney thing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the cute little renew our vows garbage. Those things just made it was mind blowing. And so I'm looking to this new case where we don't have these images of phony baloney,
Yes.
clean living. Instead, we have very scant reporting of, I saw the kids now and again, and they were dirty and they were skinny, and then we just never saw them. So this feels different.
Yes. Those kids definitely the Turpin kids had some highs in their lives where they were able to go out and interface with the world and have some adventures, and then go home and be tortured and locked up and chained up, and not given love, nourishment, or anything to survive in terms of basic needs. And then these children, because they are younger, they're different in age, and they really don't have the language, they were just surrendered to this one room, and then that was it.
So I'll go over those ages real quickly, just to remind our viewers. The oldest was 18, and the report was that she couldn't write her own name. Then it was 18, 16, 15, 14, 13, 11, 9, 8, 6, 5, twins who were 4, twins who were 20-month old, and of course, a set of conjoined twins who died. So 18 birthed children, 16 survived, 3 sets of twins, and it's just hard to even say it, but 2 were life flighted, 7 were admitted to hospital. 1 would have died, according to the governor, had that child not received attention. And at least 1 critical, I believe. And again, not because anyone called and said, we're in a crisis, come help rescue, just because they were found that way. This
Right.
is just, it's unfathomable to me. Is it unfathomable to you?
I can't understand how many systems have missed this family, but what I've read and what I've gathered, I did not personally work on this case, is that this family they moved around a lot. And oftentimes, when you move around a lot, you're trying to escape systems. So that could be child protection, that could be the school system, that could be law enforcement, many nonprofits that are trying to assist your family. Once we have seen this pattern in other families, once there's a cause of concern, and maybe there's a referral of some sort from one of those agencies I mentioned, if they come and have some interaction with family, and the family then feels like there's a threat to maybe removal or criminal, they leave. So this family in particular was moving around a lot. It could be because they wanted to not get too comfortable and under these systems that maybe we're already starting to look at them.
Would you say it's equal, less than, or more than? Some of these families who move around a lot might actually be moving because they are impoverished. They find a place, the bills come in, they leave for the next place. So it's not so much that the law is chasing them, but maybe the landlords are.
Yeah, that's very well possible. I mean, we're living in a country where it's very difficult for families to make it today. And so, and that's your average middle class family. Children that are, or young adults that are graduating from college, like, it is very expensive to live. I live in California. It's absurd. So then you think about families who have so many children so the socioeconomic is lower. And so then how do they survive? How are they? This what lends me to this family in particular. Based on, this family and how many children, they had to have been getting some sort of government assistance. And so when that happens, you have to disclose how many children you have, your address of where you live. And if those agencies need to follow up, or there's concern, then they would make a report to child protection. It really is child protection that would get involved, or law enforcement. And then oftentimes, if there's fraud in child welfare, then they have their own fraud unit and they would come out. So someone should be having eyes. So these families, either by, wanting to evade that, or by just systematically living in poverty moving. There's so many factors and variables that could come into play.
Weirdly, the Dollar General store staff, they noticed that they were using a food stamp kind of purchase device. And it just makes me wonder, were there food stamps being acquired in that household without the requisite information of how many kids there really were? Or maybe they were just surviving on, I need food stamps for me and 1 or 2 kids. Because I would think at that point, if you're getting the food stamps for the kids, they'd say, where are the kids? We don't see them registered for school.
Well, and to that point is that agencies like child welfare that provide food stamps and TANF benefits, child welfare benefits to families in need, don't necessarily correlate to school districts. And they may not necessarily, just depends on what state. They may want to see the children and they may not. So it would be that, and to the point of those government workers, they have very high caseloads. When they are distributing, aid, they may have a caseload of like 200. So then to be able to say, where is this, where is that, the system starts to weaken with that high caseload. So for them to say, where are the kids? We need to see them would really warrant some concern on that, social worker or that person that's distributing funds.
Tom Salisbury, who was the lead detective on the Turpin case, he referred me to you because he said, you're really good at what you do. And the questions that I have regarding this new case in Ohio, I think are almost the same as the questions I would have in Turpin. These kids are extracted in an emergency situation. Again, some are nonverbal, some are in critical condition. An 18-year-old can't write her own name, and in comes Denise Rodriguez Bowman. Where do you start? What do you do?
Yeah. So a forensic interviewer, which would have been my expertise, there are investigating social workers. So 2 people generally come out. Salisbury would call 2 people, child protection social workers and a forensic interviewer. The social worker would be looking at a global assessment and what are the needs immediately? What do these kids need? They'd be going to a hospital for a medical assessment, just kind of seeing the basic need and the global assessment of the family system. The forensic interviewer would come in and talk to law enforcement and say, all right, what do we have? What was the condition of the home? What are parents saying? What do we know this far about the kids? And they were going to say limited language, can't read or write, whatever that is. And then the interviewer would go into a room, and really a forensic interviewer does a comprehensive forensic interview in terms of like assessing their language, assessing their cognitive ability, the developmental ability to even interact in an interview. When we interview kids, we need kids who speak.
Yeah.
There's no other way around that. That's what an interviewer does. And we mirror, we follow, we're really patient. We do a lot of rapport building with kids prior to starting a forensic interview because we're a stranger. But it's an art.
Well, tell me about that. How do you build that rapport with kids who may have been, there was awful stuff going on in the Turpin house. I don't know what was going on in this other house. I have no idea, what the Sider kids went through. But how do you build that rapport?
So there's the art and science of interviewing. We follow a protocol. So you have a question design of questions and how you ask questions, which is very different than the way most people talk to children. Right. But the rapport building is really a finesse, a little dance, really, it's hard to teach people this. Mm-hmm. If you really just know how to connect with people. It's an energy exchange, it's a presence, it's a kindness, but without being super kind and giving them all this information. And you really are walking a line, but you, with experience, you come in saying like, tell me everything about you. And if there's like apprehension, you take it really slow. You may ask to draw with them or color.
But you
or
don't go to the heart of the crime right away. I mean, you don't just come in
absolutely
and say,
not.
tell me everything your parents did, because that's it. It's
No.
over.
Mm-mm. You know, you oftentimes too, if there's a lot of apprehensiveness, you say like, tell me about how you're feeling right now.
Mhm.
Tell me what you're thinking right now. You know, I understand something's happened in your family. How do you feel about talking to me? And then kind of, you know, assessing and just debriefing with them about their concern about what's happening in their family system in that moment. They may not be saying anything about abuse. It's just what their interests are. Tell me about something you like to do. Tell me everything about what you like to do. And then you hear what they like to do rather than me saying, do you like school? Do you like pizza? Do you like food? Do you like,
Mhm.
no, it's asking them what they are into, what they like, and then you play off that. You kind of grow that. You do narratives, which is a narrative is really, I'm going to ask you a question that's open-ended. Tell me everything about what you like to do. I'm going to hear it, and then I'm going to build a narrative off that you, the child, is going to have to explain. So you said you like to dance. Tell me about the last time you danced, or you like to, you know, play with your
Where do you
siblings.
dance?
Yeah, yeah. Tell me about where, you know, tell me about you like to play with your brothers and sisters. Tell me about the last time. We're actually trying to build an event. So we when we do this work, we're not going to who, what, when, where.
Right.
We're going to tell me about something. The kid is to then tell you a little bit, and then you say, tell me about the last time you did that. Tell me of everything from beginning to end. And you're
Denise, is
trying
this
to get the child to talk.
so this is rapport building, but at the same time, there must be things that come out that are just clear and convincing evidence. So for instance, what do you like to do? I like to walk from the one wall to the other, and I do it 300 times a day. This is now evidence. Like it's your rapport
Right.
building, but you're getting the goods.
Right. And so then you're like, tell me everything about doing that. How do you do it? Where do you do it? You know, explain it to me, essentially, is what we're saying. We use different language. That is part of a protocol, but we're like, tell me everything about that. That's open-ended questions. And you then follow them. And as you follow them and you're listening to that, then you're going to say, okay, well, you said that you do this many times a day. Like, tell me more about that. How? Like, help me understand. I don't
Or
know. What's
why?
there?
Meaning my mom told me I have to.
Yeah, we do it. We don't necessarily go, why do you have to do these things? You know, we are doing it very subtly. We're
Mhm.
doing it dance very subtly. And we will get to that we'll get to that point about like who makes you do that, you know, what's the reason for that? So that they have that opportunity to speak their truth, their experience. It's their experience, it's their truth. And oftentimes, sometimes these kids don't understand that it's not wrong. So,
Yeah.
an interviewer is really like a facial, the tone of my voice has to really be built in neutrality and objectivity and exploring all different hypotheses. So, whatever they're saying to me, I'm going to be leading it up with another question. But what we really like to do is get them to explain it all to us, and then we'll go back and ask additional questions.
Where's your goal when you find a circumstance? And let's just talk about this Ohio
Okay.
circumstance. 12 by 12 rooms, 16 kids. You can't lie down 16 bodies in that much space. So what's your goal now? Are you looking as a forensics interviewer? I need to know if there was, if they were physically forced into doing certain things through pain. Um, I need to know if food was withheld, which is another form of torture. Um, I need to know whether there was sexual abuse of these children. Are you have goals that you're headed towards, or is everything so open ended you're waiting to find out what the spectrum is?
So, there's many protocols in the United States that we follow, and most states follow different ones. And it just depends on the interviewer, their comfortability, like where they are with the child. Like no interview completely looks the same because a child is uniquely different. These children would not be a typical interview, right? Because they don't really have language, and there's a lot of deficits based on the fact that they were not in school and things like that. So when you say like, I would say like, tell me about what you eat. When do you eat? Like, explain to me what you're eating, and you get them to explain it. I am not going to say like, do you eat in the morning? Do you eat in the afternoon? Do you eat at night? I'm going to say, like, when you wake up in the morning, tell me what you first do. And then what do you do after that? And what do you do that? We build that up and then say, and tell me what you eat. Tell me where you're eating. Tell me who's giving you the food. Help me understand, when you're hungry, what can you do to eat? Where do you get that food? So we're doing it a little differently the way you ask it. So what we do is we listen to, like, you may be an investigator saying, I want to know this, I want to know this, I want to know that. And then we go in there and kind of ask it in a different way. So with the sexual abuse allegation, we would say something like, I talk to kids when, something's happened to their body. Tell me, has something happened to your body? And if they don't really understand what that means, then we funnel it a little bit more and say, let's go over body parts. Tell me what you call these body parts. Do you have private parts? And they may not know what that means, especially these children, right? Because they're not nurtured. They're not in school. They're not learning this by teachers. That touching is wrong. So certain touching is wrong. So then we have to scaffold it a little bit and say, I talk to kids when someone's touched them on these parts of their body. What do you call this? And we'll go to the private, or, to the other private parts, and then say, has someone touched you? That's a yes, no question. Generally, we try to keep away from those yes, no questions. But if we do get a yes, then we say, tell me about that. Who did that? What happened? Help me understand what happened. And so then it is a lot of patience on an interviewer's part, and they generally can be long interviews, and we're kind of like moving it along just based on the kid's ability to be in that room and how long they can be in that room.
And the child's willingness to reveal what's so mortifying potentially to them or terrorizing. Never tell anybody, or I will do something to you. Will never leave those kids. So
Right.
how do you get beneath the terrified child? And again, I don't know that that's the circumstance in this home. I know something is very wrong in that home, but how do you get beneath the terrified child who thinks everything will get worse if he or she says anything?
So the difference between these kids and the Turpin kids is that the Turpin kids, they were ready. One of the siblings jumped out of the room, got help, and said, we've had enough. So when I talked to them, the one child, she never stopped talking. She was like, talk. She told me everything. These kids are accidental disclosures is what we would call that. They did not make the intentional outcry. Someone didn't go get rescued, or they didn't find a support person to be able to tell, what is going on. So then when you, from the, authorities, they still see you as a person with this system. They may not have the words or know what that is, but it's scary to them. And so you go and talk to them. They, accidental disclosures, those kids may not tell you initially what happened. It may take time. So you may try to interview them and they're not saying anything. They're really reluctant. They won't speak, or they're very limited in disclosure.
How do you make them feel safe? How do you convince them, oh no, this is now the safe place. You are free to speak. How do you convince the little kid?
So we say those kind of things like, this is a really safe room. Everyone here that's here to talk to you today. My job is to talk to you, to keep you safe, to understand your family, figure out how we can help to understand what's happened to you. This is a safe place. So it is language. It is a feeling. It is a finesse of the interviewer to make that kid feel that way. Do all kids come out feeling safe? No, but it's like so many little parts of who you are as a person is how you conveying like a lot of through your eyes, through your tone, through your body language, that you really genuinely do care and that you're here for their safety. And then we'll say, like, it's really important that I know what happened. It's really important I know what happened so that we can help you. Let us help you, but we need to know what happened. And then there's a reluctancy. It can take about 20 minutes just in that space, just saying it, going to non-abuse related topics, talking about things that are not there, bring it back in, see if you can get something, take it back out, just depending on the kid. So you're kind of going in and out of a little bit of disclosure, talking about safety and they're okay, and then trying to get information, and then going back to non-abuse related topics.
Does it ever work with the nonverbal? I'm thinking about Ruby Frankie's case when one of the children, it was a little girl, her head was shaved, she was sitting in a closet, and the police officer, God bless him, was so gentle and dear, offering her pizza. She just wouldn't move or speak. Do you ever, yeah, and do you ever get a child who just does not break from that? Like, you will never get through, you will never get anything from that child. They will continue to be nonverbal. They will not give up the goods.
So when I saw that just recently, actually, I watch them often. And so I saw that and I thought it's just a little too soon for her. So that officer doing those things, that was nice. It was a nice gesture. He was trying to, build rapport. He was trying to show that he was safe. And that's great. They should do that. But they should really never in that moment try to start forcing conversation about what happened to them. That's why forensic interviewers exist. Yeah. They should be the safe person, let them reiterate, you're safe, we have you. And then a skilled forensic interviewer will come in, and they really do a lot of effort not to align with law enforcement. You're a neutral person. You're not the police, and you're not the child protective social worker. And sometimes you need to articulate that. Like, I'm just a lady who talks to kids, and I understand something happened. I'm really here to hear you and what's happened, but let's get to know each other. Let's do this non-abuse related information gathering before we even get there. So that's what we would do with that little girl. It wouldn't be in her best interest, when I saw that, to interview her in that home where she was victimized. Get her out of there and get her into a child advocacy center. They're all over the country. They are built on 10 standards that is recognized by the National Children's Alliance, so that there is best practice on how to do that. So when you take a child to a child advocacy center, it's very friendly. It's child friendly. It's all made for children. It's all those systems are set in place to help this reluctant child start to speak. Right. That is why they exist.
And like I said, do you ever have ones that just never, ever come around?
Yeah. I mean, I've had kids that never spoke. But, when I was younger, when I first started the work, it was a little bit more difficult. As I started to kind of become really comfortable as an interviewer, to really just, here's my protocol. Yes, I know what I need to do as a forensic interviewer, but I can be a human. And bringing in like that humanistic part, just so like, you can't say, I care about you so much. You can't say those things because you've got to go to court. And that could be suggestive, could be seen as coercive. Mm-hmm. So really it's just a presence. And I'd say that I was the person they would bring the most difficult kid to and say, let's see if you can do it. And oftentimes I could do it, but it's a lot of humility. It's a lot of grace. It's just like, you're really like surrendering to like the space of like saying before an interview or like please let me be like the best self that I can be, and let them know that I'm really authentic and getting that I'm here. I care. Really, I do.
I mean, it sounds to me like you truly have to have the patience of a saint. And me as an interviewer, I would go mad because I'm just always diving for the information as quickly as I can. Mm-hmm. But I want to ask you about the heart. Look, all of it's hard, but when there's sexual abuse of these kids, sometimes the criminal code is so specific. I mean, there's penetration, there's not. And these are the kinds of questions I can't even imagine how you get there. How do you?
Oh, that's a lot of it just depends. But again, I really firmly believe that forensic interviewers, when all of them out in the country, they're amazing people, but you have to be at the top of your game. Like you have to be able to have a lot of constructive criticism based from your colleagues in the work. You have to constantly reevaluate yourself and say, what did I do right or what did I do wrong in order to get these kids to talk? When we talk about penetration, we follow like, tell me about the first time, tell me about the last time, tell me about another time that was different. Most forensic interviewers, the majority of the work is sexual abuse. So they're like 90% talking about sexual abuse, and then like the other 10% is torture, general neglect, domestic violence, things like that. And so you're really just like, tell me about where that happened in your body. What did they touch that part of your body with? Help me understand. How were your body? Tell me about how his body was. Tell me what that felt like. And then from there, you're scaffolding around, what they're telling you about which parts of their body. And then you're hearing it and you're like, you said this and this. Help me understand, what you said about this. And so they really, the kids really have to do the tough job of articulating all of the experience. And we say, tell me everything, even if you don't think it's important. Tell me everything that happened. I wasn't there. I need you to help me explain everything that happened. I know this is hard, but this is why we're here.
Do you have a sixth sense for when a child is, and I will use the AI term, AI hallucinates and comes up with stuff that's crazy. Do you ever have a sixth sense for a child who is either making something up out of anger or making something up out of remembering a nightmare and thinking it was real, or just trying to please you?
So most children that disclose sexual abuse are actually disclosing that it didn't happen when in fact it did. So most kids, when you ask a kid if they were abused sexually, they usually, more than half are saying no for true abuse that actually happened.
It's the opposite.
So it's the opposite. And when you look at false allegations, which is what kind of you're talking about, the percentage is really low.
Or innocent, like honest to God, an innocent false allegation. It was a nightmare this child thought was true because they'd been through so much of the reality.
But most kids are able to say it was a nightmare.
Okay.
And then it was, and that nightmare was this, and this. But then someone, an external person, is saying that it did happen. So then we're doing source monitoring, like where do they believe it happened and why do they believe it happened when they just told us it was a nightmare? And so then we start to explore who has talked to them and where did they get that information from. There are some kids that, are coached. And so you're trying to get that information, and then you really go into the family system. Like, tell me everything about mommy. Tell me everything about daddy. What does mommy say about daddy? What does daddy say? But you're neutral. You have to talk about both people. You can't just hone in on one.
Sure.
You can't.
The coaching terrifies me because sometimes the coaching on kids becomes their reality,
It does. And oftentimes you'll say, well, tell me how you know that. Source monitoring. I'm trying to figure out how they know that. And they say, well, because this parent told me I wasn't born yet they told me that, daddy was arrested and he went to jail because he was dealing drugs. And you say, and how old are you? Oh, it was in mommy's tummy. And you're like, okay. So, but they articulate it like they were there. Right. It's because they've been told the story by a parent and they believe it. So that interviewer needs to dig in to see how that, we just don't listen to kids and say, okay, we're done. We have to get additional information because we have to be able, or law enforcement has to be able to corroborate or decide if that these allegations are sufficient enough to continue criminally.
It seems insurmountable, almost, the kind of work you do. I want to ask you this about the 16 kids. I think about them every day, honest to God, and I'll bet you do too, knowing what you do for a living. But what do you imagine? And I know it's not your jurisdiction. I know you were with Riverside back then, and this is Ohio. But what do you imagine is happening now with them, all within these first few days and weeks?
I was a prior social worker for child protection, and then I became a forensic interviewer. I know that they were detained, right? But they were detained by Child Protective Services, whatever that they call that in their county, and they are in foster care. So many social workers. These social workers are, they usually get a bad rap. Most social workers that work in child protection get a bad rap. They're affected by these things. They have a lot of passion and care for kids. So I know from the social worker who responded to all the way to their administration, they have their best interests at heart. They're looking to put them in an environment where they're safe, where they're cared, where they're nurtured because of what they're coming from. 16 kids are hard to place together. So
Yeah.
most child protection agencies want to place kids together. That's their goal. They're not trying to rip kids apart,
Right.
kidnap kids, do all that stuff that we hear all over the internet. And I understand why people feel the way they do. I'm not arguing that point, but these kids probably can't stay together. There's not one foster home that can take 16 kids.
Will they
So
try to group allies of siblings who are more connected to each other and
yeah,
somehow learn that
yeah,
information and
yeah.
group them together?
Yeah. And sometimes because these older kids in this home are maybe parentified, like they are the
Hmm.
parent,
Yep.
they had to care and nurture these kids, they will do an assessment if that is in that older child's best interest to stay with the littles
Yeah.
or not, just for their own healing and their own like autonomy to heal and get what they need rather than taking care of all the kids.
So
So
complicated because, of course, the little one expects that the bigger sibling is the parent, but that poor sibling is a child and needs to be a child. And oh God,
and that
there's
child
a
is
no win.
18 years old now. So they
Hmm.
technically can't even be in the same room and in the same home. They would be having to be placed somewhere else. But sometimes special circumstances, they really do look at these cases and say, what can we do for these kids immediately to keep them together? They will have like multiple visits with each other very quickly after the removal so that they're still seeing each other and that they're connected. So keeping that cohesiveness together so that it just really depends. Sometimes it's not in their best interest. Sometimes things have happened between the siblings and they're saying like in their best interest they need to be separated.
I get it.
So I see that. I see them probably, getting the medical attention that they need, getting the basic hygiene that they need, and then helping them, be in a society that they haven't been in quite a long time.
I have one last question because I know your time is tight. I have so many questions, Denise, but I do want to ask this one. Is there any mention at all to these kids, or do you expect that there'd be any mention at all to these kids of their parents or their grandparents,
What do you mean?
the ones who've been arrested?
Yeah. So, love is a tricky thing.
Mhm.
And loving your family and all the dynamics, dysfunctional, positive or negative, is still that it's your family. So these kids may be asking for their parents and maybe when they're going to go home, or they may be relieved, which I've had many kids relieved. The Turpin kids, they
Yep.
were relieved to
Yep.
not be back in that. They were just like over the moon. Like, do I ever have to see my parent again? Please tell me I'm never going to see them again. I don't want to see them again. I love my foster parents. I love this home I'm in. I love being in school now. I don't want to go back.
Mhm.
So it really and it may not be all of them. You have 16 kids and they may all feel differently. It really lends me to mom having kids really early on in her life, a child herself without a lot of education, probably with a family system that was probably abusive and neglectful prior to coming to this with this man in this home. And there's sometimes at some point you have to say whose comes first, my kids or my husband and this family system, this dysfunctional family system. And they may just not have the resources or the knowledge of how to get out of those
And
situations.
of course, we don't know any of it yet, but we will
No,
learn. And who knows how many crimes might be uncovered and added to the
right.
pile they're already facing. My God, Denise, you are a saint. Thank you for the work that
There are
you.
many saints all over the country. I want to acknowledge that there are many people doing this fabulous work, and it's not easy.
It's really not easy, and you do have to have the patience of a saint. And thank you for doing the work that you do, that you've done, and thank you for sharing it with us. Can I have you back?
Yes, yes, I'd love to come back.
Thank you so much. It's great to talk to you. My great thanks to Denise Rodriguez Bowman for that interview and just that wisdom. And I think she's going to be back because there's so many more questions I have. We don't know the a lot more about the Siders case. And I think we're at the tip of the iceberg, honest to God. But boy, oh boy, that's wisdom that is immediate. It's the here, it's the now. And what those kids will be going through right now and likely for weeks to come will form likely the backbone of this case against those four who've been arrested: mom, dad, grandma, and grandpa. I do want to say one thing about the Turpin case, because many of you will probably remember it. And this was the double tragedy. They were rescued from the Turpin household and they were placed into foster homes. And then God, who could have imagined? They were some of them were terribly abused, even worse in some of the foster homes. And those became criminal cases as well. And Denise worked on those as well, doing the forensic interviews. So it's not that we forgot about it. Definitely, we just had a limited amount of time to talk. And I wanted to really focus on the Siders children and what is going on with them right now. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for everything. I always love that you're here. I love that you subscribe. I love that you're members. If you have information about any of the cases that we do, please reach out to us. dropdeadseriousinfo@gmail.com. It's our tip line, dropdeadseriousinfo@gmail.com. We can keep you anonymous if you like, or we can help connect you to the authorities if you want to report information to them as well. In the meantime, thanks so much for listening. Thanks for watching. And remember, truth isn't just serious, it's drop dead serious.